Good morning everyone and welcome to this WADA webinar on the technical document for sport-specific analysis. Coming to you live from Montreal, today's session is uniquely for international federations and major event organizations and forms part of our series of code implementation webinars as we lead up to the revised code starting on the 1st of January 2015. First of all, a few introductions. My name is Ben Nichols. I'm the Senior Media Relations and Communications Manager for WADA and the moderator for today's session. It's a pleasure to introduce our presenter for today, Tim Ricketts. Tim is the Director for Standards and Harmonization at WADA. And alongside Tim here we have Stuart Kemp, the Deputy Director for Standards and Harmonization. And joining us from our Lausanne office, Fred Donze, who is the Director of International Federation Relations. In addition, we have two external experts joining us from overseas. I'm pleased to say Dr. Stuart Miller is joining us from the International Tennis Federation. Stuart is the Executive Director for the Science and Technical Department. And also Dr. Tony Pascal, who is the Chairperson of the IPC Anti-Doping Committee. So thank you to all our experts who've joined us for this webinar today. All the experts will be available for questions following Tim's presentation, so we invite all attendees to type these in as we go along, and we'll get through as many as we can in the time we have remaining. And one final item, you can follow us on Twitter this morning. We'll be using the hashtag WADAWebinar, so please follow our highlights from throughout Tim's presentation. So without further ado, I will hand over to Tim to take us through the technical document. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Ben, and hello to everyone from Montreal. Thank you all for joining the webinar on the new technical document for sport-specific analysis. During the presentation this morning, I'll refer to the technical document for sport-specific analysis as the technical document, and I'll also refer to the minimum levels of analysis as MLAs. So just some background referenced within Article 5.4 of the 2015 Code and is therefore a mandatory Level 2 document for all ADOs, so IFs, NADOs, RADOs and major event organisers to adopt and apply to their testing programs from 1 January 2015. The concept of the technical document came about following the inconsistent application of testing for certain prohibited substances that are not part of the standard urine analysis menu. Now, currently the application of these special analyses are at the discretion of ADOs and are not being closely monitored, nor are there any consequences if they are not being analysed at all. This has resulted in a clear imbalance in the testing of athletes within the same sport around the world, where these substances are at risk of abuse. Many of us will have heard the voice of the athlete saying, "Why am I being tested for all these extra substances when I know my competitors in other countries are not?" The technical document is a tool to now address this by providing minimum levels of analysis, or MLAs, that are to be applied by all ADOs who test those sports and disciplines at risk to those prohibited substances within the scope of the technical document. The technical document will aim to achieve the following. It will close current loopholes in analysis by setting MLAs. It will increase the level of deterrence, and hopefully we'll also see an increase in the level of detection given the increase of testing for these substances. It will hold ADOs more accountable and increase the quality of programs. There will also be an increase in proficiency of the WADA accredited laboratories as they receive more samples for these substances, and the end product being greater protection to the clean athletes. The technical document will result for many ADOs in a significant change to the way they implement their testing programs. Not only do ADOs have to manage a new technical document, but also there's the new code and international standards to also implement. And this has led to a need to reassess internal resources and programs and to rethink how testing programs can be more intelligent and data-driven with a view to being more target-specific. On this basis, 2015 will be a year of implementation and review of those programs rather than direct measuring of the compliance to the technical document. This will also provide WADA and the Technical Document Expert Group with the opportunity to review the implementation and to consider if any adjustments to the technical document are required for 2016. ADAMS will be used to monitor the level of implementation, and the annual testing figures reports that WADA publishes will contain the level of analysis by testing authority, by substance, by sport and discipline. WADA therefore urges all ADOs to attempt to meet the full MLAs so that the best possible evaluation can be undertaken by not only WADA but also the individual ADOs in preparation for 2016. During 2015, WADA will be reviewing the implementation of the technical document and welcomes comments from ADOs at any time. So please provide your feedback to the email address that you see on the slide. The development of the technical document was primarily based on physiological and non-physiological demands in conjunction with the international federations. The sports were classified into similar physiological categories to create a level of consistency, and this was a similar approach as applied in the DRENG study of Anti-Doping Norway on this topic. The performance benefit of substances was also assessed, so ranking how effective these prohibited substances were in increasing performance. And finally, we also considered the existing laboratory capacity to analyse those prohibited substances globally. An important point for ADOs to note is that the physiological risk assessment process that was undertaken is not the full risk assessment that IFs are required to complete as outlined in the ISTI and the new guideline on implementing effective testing programs. And those of you who attended our first webinar last month will be aware of the various components that are involved in such risk assessments and the importance that each ADO conduct this to ensure they develop a robust and comprehensive test distribution plan. The technical document is just one part of this process. In terms of the consultation process undertaken with the various stakeholders, this was critical in the development of the technical document. The higher number of comments received from IFs reflects their heavy involvement at the start of the process, which related to the physiological risk assessment of over 100 sports that are signatories to the code, and we thank all the IFs for their involvement in that process. The feedback and submissions received from the NADOs focused on a number of implementation aspects, and this was particularly important given the impact the technical document will have jurisdiction over. The laboratories were also consulted given the impact this document will have on their operations. And so the final product of the technical document is that it's broken into 6 sections. The first 3 are the main body, and Appendix 1 and 2 contains the MLAs by sport and discipline tables. The other 3 sections are supporting documents which WADA can update at any time. Now, these are available on the website, and the French and Spanish versions of the technical document will be published in the coming week. There's 3 categories of prohibited substances that are within the scope of the technical document. The first is the erythropoiesis stimulating agents, or ESAs. Now, this is the new term, I guess, the laboratories are putting around EPO, which includes EPO and its various analogues, such as sera. So when you request an ESA analysis to the laboratory, you will now automatically receive an EPO plus all the other detectable analogues of EPO, including sera, in either the urine or blood. The other categories of substances are growth hormone and growth hormone releasing factors. And further, document B of the technical document. At this point, all WADA accredited laboratories can test for ESAs and growth hormone. There are some current laboratory limitations for growth hormone releasing factors, which is why they have been grouped with growth hormone, but this will hopefully be enhanced in 2015. Details of which laboratories offer which services will be touched on later in the presentation. In terms of the other prohibited substances on the list, those analysed in a routine urine sample for either an in-comp or out-of-comp test are not part of the technical document. Where a sport is determined to have a very minimal risk to those prohibited substances within the scope of the technical document, LA. However, any ADO may wish at any time to test a sport or discipline that has an MLA of 0. The prohibited substances on the technical document are still prohibited to all sports regardless if they have a 0. So just to reiterate, the minimum level of analysis outside the technical document is the current routine standard urine analysis that labs perform for in-comp and out-of-competition samples. Growth hormone. Well, this substance and the analytical methods have been in the spotlight over the past 18 months following an appeal to CAS by a cross-country skier based on the challenge that the growth hormone test had the potential to report false positives. And as a result, the growth hormone analysis methods were suspended at all WADA accredited labs in March 2013. And a full review of the analytical methods were undertaken by an independent expert group. And in June 2014, the growth hormone isoforms method was given the green light for WADA labs to begin analysing again. And those ADOs that had samples stored during this period, had collected and stored samples, were able to start analysing them again. There are actually two methods of detection for growth hormone. The first, as I mentioned, is the growth hormone isoforms test, available in all labs. It has a relatively short detection window, 24 to 48 hours post-use. The second is the biomarkers growth hormone test, which is currently not available in labs due to the revalidation of some of the equipment used in the analysis process. And WADA is in its final stages of completing the testing and revalidation of the new equipment used in this analysis process, and we hope that we will see this method available in 2015. The biomarkers method is very strong in its longer detection window compared to the isoform method. However, it may not detect growth hormone in the early phases of use, which is why it's best to use both the isoforms and the biomarkers methods together. Of course, detection windows are subject to a number of factors, such as route of administration, dosage rate, and even gender, so there is no exact window for these prohibited substances due to these variances. But this can be provided as a guide and should be kept in mind. The breakdown of the sports and disciplines and their MLAs reflect the different physiological risks to the prohibited substances within the scope of the technical document. And as an example, the athletics, track and road disciplines vary in their percentage of analysis based on the different physiological aspects of power to strength to endurance, from the sprint to longer distance disciplines. The risk of ESAs increase as the distance increases to reflect the greater requirement on the aerobic energy system and the benefits that ESAs can provide. Some may find the 10% ESAs for athletic sprint unusual. However, we need to think of the preparation phases in a sport as well as the competition, and we do know from prior doping cases and the performance-enhancing effects of ESAs that this substance can assist in the ability to conduct a high volume of workload during training phases. Appendix 1 of the technical document alone contains 173 sports and disciplines and the reflective MLAs. Those sports that may not be listed may not be signatories to the code or are not mandated to have a minimum level of analysis. However, ADOs are free to apply such analyses to these sports and disciplines at their own will. In terms of national and international level athletes, the technical document should be only defined and applied to these. The definition of the international and national level athlete will be defined in an IF's and NADO's own rules. Of course, the technical document analyses applied to athletes outside of this definition will not be calculated towards the ADO's efforts in meeting the MLAs, but ADOs are of course free to conduct those analyses on those athletes outside those definitions at risk. The ISTI, and more so the new guideline on implementing effective testing programs covers the steps in conducting a risk assessment, which ultimately leads to the number of tests that are to be applied to each sport and discipline that an ADO wishes to conduct. The MLA percentage is then applied to the number of tests for each sport or discipline to determine the minimum number of analyses to be performed for those prohibited substances. The next step is the implementation phase, ensuring that the technical document tests are applied based on reason. And by this I mean utilising as much information as possible to support the application and the timing of those tests to those athletes at risk. There may be some circumstances where the calculation results in less than one test due to a small number of tests being planned for a particular sport or discipline, or a low MLA percentage being applied to that sport. In such circumstances, the minimum figure should be rounded up to 1 as the minimum number of analyses to be applied. Meeting the MLAs is only one part of the technical document. The second part, and most crucial, is ensuring those tests are applied to the athletes at risk at the right times and for the right substances. And this requires the use of supporting information such as ABP data, tip-off, suspicious whereabouts, injuries and other identified risk factors. And ADOs are provided with the flexibility of who, where and when to apply the TD tests. The feedback we've received from ADOs is that they would like greater guidance around the timing of these tests, focus their resources in a more strategic way, and further information and education about the prohibited substances and their detection windows would also be of benefit. As a result of this, WADA and the Technical Document Expert Group are currently formulating a document on which we hope to make available before the end of this year or early in 2015 on this particular area. Of course, such a guidance document will not replace the key role that APMU units play in targeting ESAs or other blood-boosting substances. Further, the breakdown of this should be driven by a risk assessment and risk factors. However, as a guide, the experts in these substances are suggesting that 60 to 70% for ESAs and 70 to 80% for growth hormone tests should be applied in an out-of-competition testing environment. When we looked into how ADOs counted the number of tests, we came across various counting methods. As an example, some ADOs count a urine, a blood and an ABP sample as 3 tests. Others counted dilute samples and even the number of ESAs and growth hormone analyses as individual tests. To enable a consistent approach for the calculations of the technical document, the baseline figure to determine the number of analyses will be the number of tests planned to be conducted. One test is considered as one sample collection session for one athlete. This is regardless of how many samples may be collected from that athlete during an individual sample collection session. As an example, if an IF collects a blood and urine sample from 4 athletes during the same sample collection session, then this would equate to 4 planned tests. Number of samples collected, nor the number of specific analyses applied, but the measurement for the technical document will be the number of tests or individual sample collection sessions conducted. This can also be a true reflection to the number of athletes tested and can also outline the number of times the same athlete may be tested as part of an ADO's program. Just as in counting the number of tests to be conducted is important, it's also important to count the number of analyses and how this is undertaken. If you conduct an ESA analysis in either urine or blood, or both during the same sample collection session on one athlete, this will be counted as one analysis towards the MLA of that sport or discipline. If you conduct a growth hormone isoforms method or a growth hormone biomarkers method, or both during the same sample collection session on one athlete, it is counted as one analysis towards the MLA of that sport and discipline. if you conduct a growth hormone releasing factor analysis, it is counted as one analysis towards the growth hormone. And just on this point, the majority of your analyses for this group of substances, the growth hormones and the growth hormone, on the basis that growth hormone can be analysed for in all laboratories. In relation to the testing authority, in circumstances where the International Federation contracts a NADO to collect samples on the IF's behalf, the International Federation would be the testing authority. So any technical document analyses conducted under such contract would be credited to the IF's MLA as the testing authority. The athlete biological passport. The hematological module is not mandated within the technical document for 2015. The technical document expert group agreed that a strong recommendation to all sports and disciplines that have an MLA of 15% or above for ESAs should be implementing an ABP blood program in their sport or discipline. Those ADOs already implementing ABP blood programs are able to apply for a reduction in the MLA for ESAs of up to 50%, subject to the criteria listed in the technical document being fulfilled. Now, this is not an automatic reduction. The criteria needs to be met, including that the existing ABP program is being implemented effectively, and the ADO provides supporting evidence and reasoning to validate this request. So when these applications are received, they will be reviewed quite closely, and we may require further information to validate the implementation of those existing programs. A number of other prohibited substances were considered during the development and consultation process, but which are not included in the final technical document. These include hemoglobin-based oxygen carriers, known as HBOX, homologous blood transfusions, known as HBT, and insulin. Some of the reasons for not including these on the technical document were that there were deemed to be greater performance-enhancing benefits to be gained from other substances, such as ESAs, compared to the HBOX, HBT. Dangers of use in terms of side effects and potential death in the incorrect use of these substances is also a possibility. Insulin currently has a limited laboratory capacity, and further research around the testing method is also required. So the focus in 2015 is to be the key groups of substances that ADOs can apply their limited resources towards these. These other prohibited substances, however, remain on the prohibited list, and also they may be added to the technical document in the future. For now, the testing of them should be conducted on an intelligence-based approach. Example, HBOX and HBT, in line with suspicious ABP profiles, or other supporting information on high-risk sports and athletes. Insulin is known to be used for recovery and in conjunction with other substances such as growth hormone and anabolic steroids. Therefore, as a guide, ADOs should consider the inclusion of some insulin analyses for those sports highlighted as a high risk to growth hormone as part of their testing strategy. ADAMS has had a number of enhancements to enable the implementation of the technical document in 2015. These include a greater breakdown of sport and disciplines to reflect the differences in MLAs in the technical document. There's also been the inclusion of the sports discipline as a mandatory field in ADAMS when setting up mission orders, inputting DCFs, and when laboratories are entering results. ADOs must ensure that the laboratory copy of their doping control forms has an area for the discipline to be recorded, to ensure that the laboratory can correctly input the results against the right sport and discipline in ADAMS. Also, clear communication on the type of analysis and the testing authority and result management authority must also be provided to the laboratories. Growth hormone releasing factors and insulin have also been added to the laboratory reporting menu and these categories will also now be included in the annual testing figures report for 2015 data moving forward. So overall, this will enable accurate reporting and a review on the number and type of analysis for each testing authority by sport discipline, and will also clearly list the number of AAF's adverse analytical findings against the relevant sports and disciplines. In terms of ADAMS 2016, well, this new project will begin early in the new year. WADA has received over 500 comments from ADOs as part of the consultation process to enhance ADAMS, and thanks to everyone who took the time to submit their ideas on how to improve the existing ADAMS system. A number of further changes are planned to the existing ADAMS, which will continue in its operation while the updated ADAMS is being built, and the next major ADAMS release will be in mid-December. Sports and disciplines for athletes with an impairment are contained in Appendix 2 of the technical document. These MLAs were approved recently at the WADA Executive Committee meeting and have just been published on the WADA website. Appendix 2 includes 45 sports and disciplines which undertook the same physiological risk assessment process as the able-bodied sports. The MLAs, however, have not been assigned to the various levels of classification that may exist within some of these sports, given the complexity of the classification system. It is therefore the responsibility of each ADO conducting the testing to apply the MLAs to the sport and discipline, and in doing so, considering the level of risk of the various classification systems and the athletes involved. The technical document also provides for ADOs to apply for a reduction in MLAs. Now, this is based on certain circumstances of the country or sport where such reductions will still lead to the most intelligent, effective and efficient use of available testing resources. ADOs must have a robust testing strategy that is still effective and proportionate to the level of risk and available resources, and the burden is on the ADO to prove this, similar to the reduction in ABP programs. The criteria for such applications and the associated forms can be found within the technical document. There has been great interest in the publishing of laboratory prices and their available services as a result of the international standard for laboratories, which will be occurring from the 1st of January 2015. Each laboratory will have its own pricing template which will be stored securely in ADAMS and which the laboratory will be responsible for populating. The template also includes other laboratory services such as the cost for sample documentation packages, the cost for access to or use of an APMU, and even the storage of samples will be included in this template. This will provide, at a click of a button, a clear view of what services a lab offers and what their prices are, and there will be a reporting function available as well, so ADOs will be able to select a number of labs in a particular area and to view and compare the services and prices available. And you'll see an example of the template here, which is currently being tested in the ADAMS system and will be released in mid-December for the laboratories to start populating that. Unfortunately, it won't be available until 1 January for the ADOs, so those IFs or MEOs planning to conduct testing in the early months of 2015 should contact the relevant labs in advance to confirm the applicable costs for the services that they're seeking. So looking at the enhancements to assist ADOs and implementing not only the technical document but more effective testing programs, there is now or will be a greater ability to collect and analyse data and statistics, and this will be through ADAMS reporting. There will be ABP blood programs for some sports that may have not had one in the past. There's been the development of a new effective testing guideline and also a recent webinar on that topic as well. There will be further education on the substances that are within the scope of the technical document and guidance around testing strategies for these substances. As I mentioned, publishing laboratory prices and the services for each lab within ADAMS, and an increase in the capacity of some laboratories for their ability to analyse for the prohibited substances that are within the technical document. Of course, all of this will need to ensure that greater partnerships between ADOs are occurring, so between the IFs and the NADOs, sharing of data in intelligence. So that wraps up the presentation on the technical document this morning, and I'd just like to thank everyone for your input into the development of the technical document. A lot of positive work has been done, and I think we're heading in the right directions towards certainly the delivery of more effective programs than we were in the past.